Retail Club is building retail's first AI native community, bringing together 500 AI champions and changemakers for their inaugural AI deep dive retreat.
Fast forward probably even faster than 10 years down the road when it comes to the pace of innovation we're seeing with AI. Maybe 3 years down the road, AI is going to be infiltrating every single part of the organization. It completely disrupt the ways companies do businesses, probably create entire new businesses on both the consumer and tech sides. Well, I think it's going to completely transform how we shop. I mean, I would be very hard to convince otherwise. I don't understand, especially as we're starting to see these agentic browsers come to market. It is going to literally transform every way that you interact with technology going forward. But when I'm looking for maybe a cocktail dress for my 20-year high school reunion, I'm probably going to want to take that one into my own hands.
AI is going to be one of the most compelling motivators to bring the business of retail and the tech of retail to finally make them friends.
You're listening to the Retail Razor Show, where your expert hosts and their guests cut through the clutter in retail and retail tech.
Welcome to Season 5, Episode 7 of the Retail Razor Show, the only retail podcast in the top 10 all-time indie management podcast charts on GoodPods and the highest-ranked retail podcast in the top 100 indie marketing podcast charts on GoodPods. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
And I'm Casey Golden. Welcome, Retail Razor fans, to retail's favorite podcast, where we cut through the clutter to give you sharp insights on what's happening in retail today, tomorrow, and where we get real about what's driving the future of retail.
So, Casey, I have a question for you. How many retail conferences do you go to every year?
Traditionally 2, but none of the ones you go to. However, my travel calendar is getting stacked this year, and I think you'll find me at all of them now.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And how many retail conferences do you think the typical retail executive goes to every year?
Well, I think they're forced to go to 2, and I think that they might attend 3. I think 4 is pushing it for a retail exec.
Yeah, I think if other retail execs are like most of the folks I talk to, there are just way too many conferences available, then they can afford to just spare the time to go to them, which means the ones they do attend really have to demonstrate some strong value to get their attention.
And with all the talk and hype around AI solutions these days, it's even harder to decide what shows and conferences to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were to guess from this series of questions today, what would you say this episode is going to be all about?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's a great setup to let our audience know that we have a guest today that's here to share all the details on an amazing new retail conference experience, maybe something a bit more intentional, a lot more personal, tailored to what retailers really want to learn when they go to a conference. Am I close?
Well, Casey, it just so happens that you are 100% spot on. Amazing, isn't it? I mean, you'd think we had planned this ahead for this or something, wouldn't you?
Maybe once.
Maybe just
Maybe
this
a little
once.
bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Just this one.
Never happens.
Yep. So let me go ahead and talk a bit about our guest today. Someone I've known for many years now, have been a big fan of her work, Krystina Gustafson. And for those who don't know Krystina, she has been on the show multiple times, but I'm just going to go ahead and read through her bio for anyone that isn't familiar with her retail history. Krystina is a co-founder and the chief content officer at RetailClub, a new retreats business from the founders of ShopTalk.
I noticed you said retreats business, not event or conference business.
That's right. Retreats. You are paying close attention to what I was just saying. We did say earlier, this isn't your typical event, right? Retail Club is building retail's first AI native community, bringing together 500 AI champions and changemakers for their inaugural AI deep dive retreat, taking place September 14th to 17th in Huntington Beach, California. Prior to Retail Club, Krystina was the Senior VP of Content at ShopTalk and Grocery Shop, leading conferences in the retail grocery and CPG space. I'm sure most of our audience is familiar with those. She led the team that shaped the retail and e-commerce industry narratives across all 4 of their annual events, ShopTalk, ShopTalk Europe, ShopTalk Fall and Grocery Shop, including agenda development and speaker selection. Krystina joins Shop Talk in 2017 after spending 4 years as a retail reporter and content editor at CNBC, which is, I'm pretty sure, during the time when I first met her at an NRF conference after she had done one of the onstage interviews and one of the keynote sessions. Prior to CNBC, Krystina was a web editor at Women's Wear Daily, the trade publication for the fashion industry, which one I'm sure that you're quite familiar with. She has interviewed prominent business figures from retail and beyond, including the CEOs of Target, Sam's Club, The Honest Company, and Warby Parker, plus DreamWorks co-founder Jeffrey Katzenberg, and maybe everyone's favorite Shark Tank shark, Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful himself.
Most impressive. We'll see if you get where that's from. But the last one is very interesting to me. I am a WWD cult member.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yep. I actually saw that when it was at the last Shop Talk, if I remember right. And we could probably do another whole episode talking about that session and the interesting takeaways from it. Had lots to do with retail media. And actually, if you go back to our season opener with Drew Cashmore, I think we may have made a reference to that interview. I'll have to go back and check that. But I think we talked about it for a quick minute there.
Well, either way, we are sure to learn all about what makes Retail Club special and unique. There's a reason it's called a retreat versus a conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, you've been invited to speak at this retreat.
Yeah, that's true. I'll be leading a session titled Automate versus Augment, Debating the Ultimate Role of AI. It'll be on Tuesday, September 16th, 2:45. And as we'll learn from Krystina on the uniqueness of the format of the overall event, this is a workshop-style discussion I'll be moderating on the topic. I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully for any of our listeners today, you'll be attending and can join that session and come away learning a bit more about how AI can help you automate and augment depending on their specific needs. But it'll be a really interesting group discussion.
That's great. Hopefully any of our listeners or viewers there will find you at the event, even if they can't make your session. But go say hi.
Absolutely. Please do.
Ricardo's super nice.
Thank you. So before we jump into our conversation with Krystina, I just want to make one quick request of our fans and audience. If you like the show, please drop us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Good Pods. And leave us a review too. Now, let us know what you liked, what you didn't, what you'd like to see from us next. We really want your feedback and those 5-star ratings. It really helps us improve and grow the show.
That's right. And also a quick shout out to our fans that if you haven't checked it out yet, we recently launched our newest show in Retail Razor Podcast Network, Retail Transformers. Episode 1 just dropped a couple of weeks ago with a special return visit from our very first Retail Transformer back in season 1 of the show, April Sobral. And she's absolutely fabulous and amazing. And you definitely need to listen or watch that episode and take some notes. April brings so much value to the conversation on how to be a positive leader and what makes you a better leader.
That is so true. Definitely check it out and drop us a rating and a review on that show too. So what do you say, Casey? Should we jump into our conversation with Krystina?
Let's go.
Welcome back to the Retail Razor Show, Krystina. Great to have you back.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Ricardo. Good to see you, Casey.
Always wonderful to have you on the show. And we're so excited to talk with you today about Retail Club and what's happening with AI in retail. There's certainly no bigger topic in the industry right now other than AI, any industry, I think. Yeah. And, let's dig into what retailers can and should be leveraging to enhance their business.
Yeah, and as we've been covering AI on this show pretty much all the time now, it seems, one thing we've learned is that as rich as the tool sets become, the feature sets for all these LLMs and Gen AI, most retailers are still really looking for guidance and direction on how to identify both the best use cases and challenges to solve with AI, but let alone how to use AI to solve them. I'm always hearing retailers ask for case studies, examples. They're looking for learning opportunities to really build up that experience and knowledge level to get the confidence they need to succeed. Because we've all seen examples of retailers who may have, they'll have 10 AI projects and 4 of them end up failing, right? Or more. And they just, are trying to figure out why. Why don't we start by, Krystina, by having you give us the background on what Retail Club is and what you're hoping to accomplish with the AI Deep Dive Retreat format for this event.
Yeah, happy to. So Retail Club is a new retreats business from the founders of Shop Talk and Grocery Shop. And to your point, Ricardo, we're currently planning our inaugural event, which is our AI Deep Dive Retreat taking place in Huntington Beach in way fewer days than I would like to admit. So we're working fast and furious. But I would say really the goal for this event is to create what we're calling retail's first AI native community. If we think back, and our founding team has, done this many, many times. They had founded Money 2020, Shop Talk, Grocery Shop, and now, of course, Retail Club. And I would say across all those various events, it was never just, let's go out and build an event. All those events really were created at very transformational times for their industries, right? So FinTech Meetup, of course, alongside the FinTech revolution in that space. Mm-hmm. Shop Talk, it's crazy to think about. It's been about 10 years since that event was founded. And if you think back to then, it was when the Stitch Fixes were coming up, the Dollar Shave Clubs, the Rent the Runways, all these really disruptive businesses. At the same time, you kind of had a lot of hesitation, a lot of pushback from some of the traditional retailers about how disruptive digital and e-commerce were going to be for their businesses. And so that was really the intention of Shop Talk, right? Mm-hmm. Was to create this all new community of people who were excited about digital, excited about e-commerce. They weren't necessarily the cool kids back in 2015, 2016. And so we're very much, I would say, trying to do the same thing now for AI in retail, kind of working under this same premise that yes, AI is kind of one facet of retail innovation today, but fast forward probably even faster than 10 years down the road when it comes to the pace of innovation we're seeing with AI. Maybe 3 years down the road, AI is going to be infiltrating every single part of the organization. It completely disrupt the ways companies do businesses, probably create entire new businesses on both the consumer and tech side. So we want to be there. We want to be first, and we really want to be the trusted source for people who want to learn about how to use AI in their businesses.
Given that this is an AI-focused event, what makes AI Deep Dive Retreat AI first?
It's a really good question. I would say we want every single session, every single interaction, everything that takes place at the event to be focused on AI. So we're, I think, having about 50 plus different topics on our agenda. Every single one discusses a different use case of AI. It could be short-term, it could be long-term, it could be function-specific, it could be organization-specific, but really kind of giving people a break from their day-to-day, goals, what are you trying to accomplish this quarter? And yes, Ricardo, to your point, definitely making sure we're giving people kind of case studies, real-world examples, but giving them the opportunity to really kind of deep dive, as the name suggests, into all the possibilities of AI, not just today, but in the long term. So it's sort of a vacation from your day job. If sitting in meetings talking about AI is a vacation, I don't know if it particularly is, but really just kind of trying to be a mindset shift. We're setting that expectation with every single attendee, every sponsor, every retailer and brand who comes, that everyone needs to be showing up AI first. So everything from the content, as I was just mentioning, all the meetings that people participate in, everything is meant to be an opportunity to share your experiences with AI, ask questions about, what others are seeing, and really just kind of learn.
No, being able to have that free mind space to kind of have a creative workshop to where you can just kind of have the mental break to think and discuss with other people around these topics. We don't always get that in the work environment. Trying to find like an hour is very difficult. So
and I think what's interesting here too is your way of structuring this to be, I think of it as kind of almost a learning experience, right, for the retailers that are attending, but also an opportunity to build that community with all the tech suppliers who are bringing all these AI solutions. Probably at the end of the day, confusing more retailers than clearing up, because there's so much variety and so many options of things to choose from. So I guess what I really would like to dig into, because you and I have talked about this before, there are so many retail events now.
Yep.
It seems like every week there's another new retail event. And a lot of the retailers I talk to, the first thing they're saying is, I can't even figure out which ones to consider worth my time
Yep.
to go to, because nobody can go to all of the events that there are anymore because there's so many. But there seems to be a common format or two right across most of these events where they're always, they're keynote based, where you've got some super successful story to tell. And that's great. Right? Everybody wants to hear about those. And then you have panel discussions after panel discussion after panel discussion with folks. And not that suggesting that's a terrible format. It has its place and it works great for storytelling and for getting information across. But you mentioned this is more of an intimate kind of curated format, right? Versus the mega conference style and the panel discussion style. So what led you to focusing on that as your approach, and how do you see that as being unique here?
It's a really great question. And I think you can probably blame our team for a lot of those events that are following that format. So I think at the end of the day, we definitely believe there's always going to be a place for large scale events. We're certainly not trying to displace those. I think, people kind of attend different events with different goals. And I think to your question, Ricardo, what we've been hearing a lot of in the industry is that since there are so many of those large scale events where you're kind of running around trying to maximize every minute of your day, if you're on the tech side, it's all about kind of ROI, lead gen, et cetera. How much can you really kind of accomplish? If you're on the retailer and brand side, again, you're kind of justifying those days being out of the office. So what can you bring back to your organization to prove that it was a worthwhile few days when you weren't immediately responding to emails or jumping on calls? And so I think what we've been hearing is that people are really craving something that's a little bit more intimate, a little bit more collaborative. And I guess what that looks like in practice, right? If I kind of even break that down a little bit further, right? If you think about how you were mentioning kind of those large scale sessions, great, amazing to have some of those headliners, people who are doing best in class examples of some of these digital initiatives, whether they're AI, et cetera. But I think oftentimes what we have found is some of the most interesting conversations at events happen when the session is over, right? And people are debriefing about what they just heard, or they're at a cocktail hour, or they're at breakfast, or, whatever they're doing. A lot of times it's kind of that open dialogue that happens after the speaker has left the stage that really kind of drives the most learnings and the most impact for attendees. And so I think rather than trying to fight that, we're leaning very heavily into it, right? And so the vast majority of our content sessions are going to be what we're calling expert-led workshops, right? Ricardo, you're leading one of those on automate versus augment. Right. So really the idea there is to have a facilitator drive the dialogue among up to 30 attendees. Again, there's 500 attendees total at this event. How can we create these smaller format types of sessions where everyone can actively contribute, ask questions, share their ideas, et cetera. So your role as the facilitator is really to kind of stir up that dialogue. You'll share your insights, of course, and kind of, get people talking. But the idea is for it to be really interactive, right? And you're not just kind of passively listening to content all day. I think where there are some opportunities for, let's call it somewhat more passive content, we still want it to be interactive, but we're doing things that we call our level up trainings and tutorials, right? So we'll have someone go up on stage and show people how to do vibe coding, how to use AI to be a more effective negotiator. So even kind of when you're in those more, let's call it traditional presentation type sessions, there's still an opportunity for the audience to ask questions, for people to get a little bit more hands-on with the tools that they're, going to be expected to use in the workforce either today or in the future. So trying to be a little more creative. I think to your point, yes, there's still going to be some traditional case studies. We're still going to have some presentations from startup founders and CEOs. So I wouldn't say we're completely ripping up everything. I think there are opportunities where some of the more traditional content approaches can still have a big impact, but really being thoughtful about what that right mix is and how do we deliver the most value to our attendees.
Yeah, you've talked about breakthrough talks versus breakthrough experiences. What's the real difference from your perspective?
It's a great question. So I would say breakthrough experiences are a little bit more comprehensive. Those would be the things like the level ups that we were just talking about, the expert-led workshops. We're also going to have a couple of fun on-site experiences for people to sort of engage in more social settings. So more to come on that front. But think about like HIIT workouts, yoga, et cetera. Again, maybe you're not having a conversation with someone while you're doing a downward dog, but the idea is, okay, you both like yoga, you both like AI, you're in this amazing beachfront setting, it'll stir up some conversation. And then the breakthrough talks, I would say, are even kind of one step less structured. So those are more kind of pure conversations that happen over breakfast, up to 8 attendees, no facilitator. But again, really just kind of meant to create dialogue on some of the most pressing topics in AI, things like, what's going to happen to the SaaS solution market? What are some of the broader ethical implications of AI? And really just kind of tackling some of the meaty things that people want to have conversations about.
Well, I love that. And I think one of the other interesting things I've noticed in how you've been positioning the event is really the attendee mix. So you mentioned it's 500 people, so we're not talking about a mega event, but you're also looking for a 50-50 brand vendor mix, right?
That's exactly right. And I think the other thing that's really unique about how we're approaching the audience is how we're approaching audience members specifically. So we're not going to have an expo hall. There are no booths. The idea really, again, is for every single attendee to interact with every other attendee there and really kind of learn and collaborate. I think especially with where we are on the adoption curve, the learning curve that you were talking about earlier, Ricardo, with AI in retail, the retailers have a lot to learn from the tech solution providers. And so we want them very much to be in the mix, interacting with retailers, not meant to be kind of hawking your solutions left and right. It's going to be more kind of top to top meetings where you talk again about, how these solutions are going to shape the future of the industry long term. But we feel very strongly that in order to really kind of capture the maximum potential of AI in retail, you need to have the tech solution providers having a seat at the table alongside the retailers and brands.
Yeah, I certainly, from my perspective, I agree with that philosophies. I think especially when we're talking about a new technology like AI, you really have to rely on the expertise that the tech suppliers are bringing to the table at that to get over that initial learning curve, right before we can really start to achieve interesting things that you can tell afterwards and be one of those case studies. I just one question that sort of relates to this is, how when you think about how retailers are working with AI and this, how do you think a retail brand can kind of preserve their brand voice in an AI-driven world? And is that going to be sort of an interesting topic through the event as well?
It's so funny. I know we were talking earlier about how, it isn't even always AI that can put brands in
That's right.
water these days. So they're already facing a lot of challenges as it pertains to some of the cultural differences, let's call them, that are happening in the world and divisive issues. But yes, I think to your point, Ricardo, AI definitely ups the ante on some of the trouble that retailers can get into. I think to your question, yes, it is definitely a balancing act. What are the opportunities specific to, let's say, marketing and creative, right? There are so many more assets required to be a marketer today, whether you're supporting TikTok, whether you're supporting your influencers, as AI really does kind of take off and personalization at much greater scale as possible, just the amount of content you have to be churning out is going to exponentially multiply. And so how do you kind of use AI in a way that supports that, but isn't going to get your brand in hot water is, I think, 100% something brands need to be talking about. I've heard some people talking about just sort of the level of transparency required and would be curious to hear you guys' thoughts about this as well. At least it seems, from my perspective, there's kind of two elements here. One is, I think, the brands who are first to experiment, perhaps when consumers aren't used to it quite yet, they're going to be a little bit more like knee-jerky, where, maybe 5 years down the road, and this is common practice, it's just, it is what it is. But I think where a lot of brands kind of find themselves getting into trouble is when consumers feel like brands are trying to pull a fast one on them, and just turn something out really quickly, like, they won't notice, and they feel like they're being duped.
Yeah, we had a conversation previously on another episode where, we just kind of went into a rabbit hole on AI ethics and the brand's transparency on sharing what they are and what they aren't using AI for, especially when it comes to buying a product and that commerce piece, having the expectation of what you see is what you get. Right. Before retailers can unlock real value from AI, they need a strong data foundation. That hasn't always been retail's strong suit.
We might say that.
I think we kind of came up with the term garbage in, garbage out because it's all garbage.
Yeah.
How prepared are most retail organizations when it comes to data readiness and tech stack maturity? Obviously, I have my own opinion, but we talk to different retailers and definitely have different conversations. What do you think some of the biggest gaps that you're seeing, and what's the reality of the situation from your side?
It is such a good question, and it's so nuanced. And I know, Ricardo, you and I have talked about this a lot in the past. It's really interesting. As we were branding the event Retail Club, I was a little concerned that CPGs weren't going to identify with the event. That hasn't been the case. We are seeing a lot of pickup from them. But I bring this up because I think a lot of times it depends on the industry. I think that CPGs tend to have their house a little bit more in order today as it pertains to AI readiness. They're experimenting a lot more. They just kind of seem overall a bit more prepared on all the topics that you just brought up. But I also think when you dig into the retailer side of things, it really depends, right? I was talking to a CMO from a very large retailer a couple of weeks ago, and she was kind of off the cuff saying, well, we all have our data in order now, so now it's more about just kind of implementation. And I was like, but do we, right? I think the answer is yes. Some people are more prepared than others. The other thing that I would bring up here too is kind of, yes, garbage in, garbage out, but data doesn't always have to be perfect to get started. So I think there's also just kind of a recognition of where we are on the maturity curve. And yes, eventually we want to get to a point where everyone has a unified AI strategy and their data is all talking to each other. And yes, that's how we're going to leverage the full capabilities. But there's also a challenge if people just kind of wait for that opportunity to happen. And then all these moments pass and they haven't been doing anything with AI, they're going to miss the boat. So I think it's having good enough data to kind of start a couple
to get started.
Yeah, to get started. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, how do you guys think about that?
Well, so what's interesting to me, and this is, it's kind of an area where there's advantages and disadvantages to being a, let's say, legacy brand, right? Because you've built a lot of scale because you've been around for all, versus a relatively young brand where you have a lot less tech debt, right? Because you started recently, so you've been able to leverage all the newest, latest, and greatest things, but you lack the scale in that situation. So there's pros and cons, I think, to both. But what I find interesting with this is it's the ones in the middle that I think in between those two extremes that have the hardest time with this, because the ones in the middle tend to be the retailers who historically have put off certain tech investment and will be the first to say, well, we've gotten by this far with this platform. Let's hang on to it a little longer so we don't have to make that investment now and I can make this other investment and then we'll come back to it. But the problem is you don't come back to it. and so by putting it off, you end up compounding that issue, especially when it's around things like data integrity or a customer data platform. And these are the things that are just so fundamental to getting the data right. So that's where I think, the larger, and we see this right easily, like when you see what Walmart is doing, you see they obviously have the scale to do just about anything they can really put their minds to, right? If they just focus on it. And we see that happening versus, a specialty apparel retailer maybe that you'd find in the mall that doesn't necessarily have Walmart's scale, but they might be a newer brand. So they still have an opportunity there if they take it to do interesting things. And I think there are brands like PacSun, for example, that do really super interesting things in that sense and take advantage of their customer data. So I always find it fascinating because we talk about in so many other areas in retail where there's that middle layer of retail who are the ones struggling the most typically. And this is just yet another example of that, where it's just the nature of where you are in your kind of brand evolution that sort of puts you there, where you don't quite have the scale the large guys have. You still have some of the tech debt. You don't quite have the nimbleness that the younger brands have. And so you have to really dig in to get past that. And I think too, go ahead, Casey.
No, I completely agree, Ricardo. Keep going.
Yeah. So another example that this comes to mind is when we think about what's the latest and greatest thing that we know everyone is going to talk about in AI, it's agentic AI, right? Agents talking to agents and everybody using their AI agent to do everything, whether it's on the supply side or whether it's on the customer side. And Walmart has certainly made this surface up into the news with their recent announcements with their super agents. With that, we're talking about leveraging AI agents to guide things like discovery, personalization, or even just at the transactional level, even, right? Where the AI agents are now trying to own the transaction. How do you see that kind of reshaping the way consumers are going to find and interact with products? And is that the retail experience that you think consumers want?
Wow, that's such a loaded question.
I know.
We need a whole separate podcast.
We could do another whole conversation on that one, yeah.
There's two soapboxes here. You're more than welcome to join me or Ricardo.
Well, I think it's going to completely transform how we shop. I mean, I would be very hard to convince otherwise. I don't understand, especially as we're starting to see these agentic browsers come to market. It is going to literally transform every way that you interact with technology going forward. It's going to be on your mobile device. It's going to be on your laptop. It's going to be integrated into everything. I think to your question, we're still waiting to see what that looks like in practice. Some of the conversations that we've been having with people are, okay, as more shopping takes place on Perplexity, on ChatGPT, what happens to the brand website? There are some people who sort of are of the belief, okay, these companies are going to become their own new marketplaces and all that shopping is going to take place there and the brand website's dead. I don't know that I really personally buy into that. I think at the end of the day, we've had a proliferation of shopping channels happening for many, many years, case in point social. So I don't necessarily see it going that direction. I think my own personal hypothesis is Similar to when we see technology advances in other industries, whether it's the airlines kind of having best-in-class mobile apps that can tell where you are on your journey. They know, the day that you're flying and you get a custom page. And retailers have really had to try to catch up in order to deliver a similar level of customer experience to their shoppers. I think that's what's going to happen with kind of the LLM shopping, right? People are going to get used to searching with natural language. They're going to get used to seeing personalized recommendations. So I think it's a lot of those experiences that perhaps those other platforms are going to really kind of pioneer that are going to have to be translated onto the brand website. Now, all that said, I think it's inevitable that people are going to be shopping on these sites. I think it just depends on what category are you shopping for. Do you want it to auto replenishment? Yes, I know that I'm going to have to buy another set of size 3 diapers in a couple of weeks. So yeah, sure, go do that on my behalf. But when I'm looking for maybe a cocktail dress for my 20-year high school reunion, I'm probably going to want to take that one into my own hands. Like, yeah, maybe get some custom recommendations, but I'm not just going to be like, have at it.
Right.
What I want here, there's a lot of factors that are going to go into that. So we won't even dig into that. But, I think it's really going to depend on category. It's going to depend on, shopper mission. There's so many variables here. So I think I think especially at this phase, which I understand why, again, it's very early days, but it tends to be, from my experience, an oversimplification of things. And I think even like thinking about today's capabilities, in the LLMs and just who's the merchant of record, where they're getting their product data. There's a lot of short-term things also that need to be solved in order to kind of get to this euphoric state. So I think we really want to make sure we're kind of tackling both of those parts of the story.
I mean, retail and tech has had a little bit of they've had a culture clash for a while. And one of the things that I find really interesting, especially with this conversation with AI, is that retail rarely experiments with the end consumer. It really experiment with staff and internal processes before experimenting with the consumer. And the tech industry will experiment with the consumer in like a 2-week sprint. Like, let's just throw it out there. And I definitely see like this culture clash of like, we're not ready to take any of these conversations or experience because the risk is so high on the retail side with that customer relationship and experience. But then on the tech side, it's just like push. Where do you see anywhere where AI is delivering like a real ROI in retail right now and something that is moving forward in a meaningful way? I'm seeing a lot more on the B2B side and like supply chain and ops versus CX.
Yeah.
But to get some of these efficiency gains, what are you seeing on your end with these conversations with retailers?
I think that's largely right. It's interesting. I've had a couple conversations with folks about that very same topic. There are some organizations that are rethinking how they position their AI leaders to be more growth focused versus efficiency focused. So I think we will see that inflection point coming, but I would say it's more the rarity these days. It is more conversation about efficiency still. So your question about ROI, I would say 2 other areas that I would add where people are seeing real results is customer insights and using synthetic data for faster product development, getting consumer reaction to marketing campaigns or whatever it is. And the other one would be not like as much CX, but CS and the customer service side. And so we're actually going to have the COO of Minted do a case study about their partnership with Sierra, just talking about those customer service use cases. She's going to go pretty deep into not only just how they selected them, the results they're seeing, but also how they rewired their organization a little bit to bring the customer service agents, the human customer service agents, I should clarify, along on the journey and kind of upskilled them as they implemented that top-notch technology. So I think that'll be a pretty interesting one for people who are looking for real-term ROI type of examples.
I love the phrase you use, like rewiring. Roles and teams are evolving. There's a level of fear throughout every industry about how fast and how they're evolving. What do you think an AI native organization looks like or will look like?
Wow. It's, again, a great question. I think it's easier for the businesses that are building themselves from the ground up that way. I was actually looking yesterday, gosh, don't quote me, I'm going to forget the name of the company, but Mariam Nafisi, who had founded Minted, she just started a new company where you basically go in, plug in to their marketplace, a piece of jewelry that you want to design, and then it hooks you up with designers who will design it, produce it for you, and then service you with that solution. So that's a company that from the ground up is being built on AI. I think for other companies, they're going to have to more shift to being AI first. And it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be pretty. And there's going to be a lot of silo removal, a lot of upskilling, even just kind of on the upskilling front, because maybe that's the easier thing, funny enough, to kind of tackle. There's not even a consensus on that, right? Some people are bringing in the big consulting firms to lead sessions. Some people are setting mandates about you need to be AI literate by this point. But I think even kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, like where do you even give people the space in their day, right? It feels like
exactly. Like where do you get the space in the day to even think of use cases or learning, right? Being on the startup side, Monday was a learning day for me. I experimented, I vibe coded, I downloaded new software, I tried new things, I watched YouTube videos, I did a course. Like I spent a whole day just playing.
Yeah.
And that's something I could, would never think that anybody that I know can do in a corporate environment, is to just sign up and test it and run some things through the system and see, what do you like? What do you not like? What's working? What's not working? Learn it. It's hard to learn by reading, especially in this environment, right?
That's true.
There's, I forgot what I was going to say. Well, I guess it must not have been that important, but
I do think that Pacey, go for it.
The tech side has often lacked the business process the business acumen. And this is one of the areas where if you're not a technical first executive, you can be. And I think that understanding the business and having the business acumen of how the product is sold and made and coming up with those use cases, I think that AI is going to be one of the most compelling motivators to bring the business of retail and the tech of retail to finally make them friends.
Yeah. I love that. That's actually, that's a big part of our approach, to be honest, right? Like we have a ton of people with data, AI, type titles, but then we also have a lot of business leaders, and that's intentional because we want to make sure businesses are talking to each other, and the CIOs who've been trying to convince their CEO forever, Ricardo, to your point, we need a CDP or we need XYZ.
Exactly.
They don't listen to them, but maybe they'll listen to the other people.
Well, then I think that's why it's so unique in this case that, how you're bringing everyone together in these more smaller sized sessions, right? So that people can actually interact and have these conversations and build those relationships in a form where they might otherwise not get a chance to. So I think that's a really valuable thing that's going to happen here at Retail Club. With that in mind, one thing I have to ask you is, what happens after September's event? What's the long-term vision for Retail Club?
It's a great question. I would say we're candidly still figuring it out. We are launching this. I roll at the speed of AI, but I think we literally decided to launch this thing at the end of May. So it's been about 60 days and we have about 30-ish, 45, I don't know. Don't even tell me how many days it is until the event. And so I think what we saw was the pace of change was happening so fast. We just needed to go to market, right? Even if I think back to the time in May, we were basically operating at that point. And Ricardo, I know you and I had talked about this. We were operating under the thesis that as AI continued to mature, it was going to increasingly verticalize. It's again, like 2 months later, that has already come to fruition, right? So again, it's just, we got to run fast at this thing. We got to move and really kind of be first to market to get people to really kind of trust the brand for the long term. I think as we figure out what's next, there are a couple of things we think might happen. I think one is we do really want to focus on meaningful connections, more of a community focus. And so I think what that will probably mean is not getting to the 10,000 attendee mark, how we've previously done in the past. Maybe they would get slightly bigger, more of a festival style, maybe like 1,500. Maybe we keep the retreat style, if people really like this format and they feel good about 500. Would we do dinners? Would we do things in local markets? I think there's a lot of opportunities, and what we kind of want to do is get this one off the ground, see what our attendees think, get a lot of raw feedback, and then just kind of iterate from there. The other thing that Anil Agarwal, our founder and CEO, talks a lot about is we would be ignorant not to recognize that events are also going to be disrupted by AI. And so, what does the future of events look like in an AI world? If there are fewer people, in case of what we were talking about, if there are fewer people working in a retail organization, it's probably a lot harder to pull off a event of 10,000 people. So it's a lot of considerations along that front as well. But I think our founders have always been very product obsessed, very kind of community focused. So I think some of those ethos, no matter where we go, that'll be a constant. But I think what exactly it looks like is a little bit up in the air, to be transparent.
So 10 years from now, what's the most cringe thing we're going to be looking back about 2025 and retail AI?
Okay, so I'm going to base this off of 10 years ago at Shop Talk. And all the people that were like, e-commerce isn't a thing. I think
I remember that.
I think it's going to be less that people don't believe that AI is transformational. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like in my own little bubble where I think everyone is a believer in AI. That's probably not the case. I do think, Ricardo, to your point, there are a lot of people who are disillusioned with failed projects, whatever it might be.
Right.
But I think the cringe thing will be the people who actively tried to prevent their organizations from embracing it. You know, some of those maybe executives who are like, I've only got 5 years left in the office. I'm just going to, ignore this, not upskill myself. And so I think it's the people that kind of like actively ignore it. And
you know what? That is so real.
Yeah, that's true.
I've literally heard people say, Casey, I got 2 years left. I got pension. I'm not trying to shake any trees.
Yep. Right. Yep. Yeah, it happens.
Love you, support you, but I'm not doing anything.
And just think about like their organizations, all those people under them. That's to me why it's so cringe. It's like, I understand there's a natural human instinct to resist change, but your decisions impact a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it definitely feels like Retail Club is shaping up to be a unique experience for retailers. And it sounds like your team is working really hard to create this AI first experience in a way that delivers what retailers and brands have been asking for and what we've been seeing on the show too. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing more about Retail Club, what it is, what makes it special. Huntington Beach is a great location. So
for sure. And I'll just add, the deadline to register for anyone who's interested is August 22nd. So make sure you go register. It's just retailclub.com, and retailers and brands qualify for up to $1,250 in travel reimbursement if they participate in our hosted program. So there's my shameless plug for anyone
that's great.
Yeah, that's great. We'll have that in the show notes too for everybody. Well, thanks again, Krystina. I know I'm really looking forward to this event. It really feels so different from other retail events like you and I have talked about before. I think it really brings a good personal touch and educational twist to the whole retail conference format. And I think that's been missing for a while for most retailers and brands. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Ricardo, I'd say that's a wrap. If you enjoyed our show, we have a simple ask. Please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods. Remember to smash that subscribe button in your favorite podcast player, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a minute. As always, a huge thank you to our amazing Good Pods listeners for helping us consistently rank in the top 3 spots on Indie Management and Indie Marketing Podcast chart with every episode. I'm Casey Golden.
Please follow us and share your feedback at Retail Razor on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram. If you want to preview highlights and transcripts from each episode right in your email inbox, please subscribe to our Substack newsletter. The Retail Razor Show is part of the Retail Razor Podcast Network. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep cutting through the clutter and stay sharp. This is the Retail Razor Show.